All right, so we're recording now, so I'll post this video in case we do anything. All right, so I'm sharing the screen. All right, so you guys had a few questions. So this is the lab, so I'll go over some of this. So basically, as you know, we're doing Linux commands, and we're learning what they're for. So basically here, as I said, bullet number 2, you just have to go to a website, make sure you have internet access. So visit your favorite website and make sure you can reach it, and that should tell you that you have internet access. Obviously, later on, we're going to learn how to, do things through the terminal to have internet access. All right, then after that, you open the terminal. So I have my computer. Turn it off. Okay, I did. Let me start it. All right, so the next example is sudo, the sudo command. So what's that for? It's basically to elevate privileges. So by default, and we'll learn about this later, Linux uses the principle of least privilege. So initially, you're just going to have the permissions that you need and nothing more. So when you're logged in as seed, you'll be just a regular user. And then when you use something like sudo, you can basically increase your privileges if you've been pre-approved as a system administrator, basically. So that's what the sudo command is for. So we can see a use case of it down here where we want to install a program, but installing programs in Linux may require privileges. So you have to add in front of the command the word sudo. So that's what it's for, okay? Otherwise, you may not be able to get it to work. Now, don't overuse sudo, okay? Only use sudo when required, because what may happen is sometimes, let's say you create a file with sudo, that file may be get the user name of root instead of your actual username. And so what's going to happen is it's going to restrict access to the file. So you have to be careful with that. So we'll see examples of that, but you can sometimes actually overcomplicate things by using sudo. All right, Nano we already looked at. So this is basically an editor. There are several editors, as I said in Linux. This is one of my favorite, but there are others like VI, etc. ls, this is an easy command, right? We already saw this on Wednesday. CD is for navigating. It basically means change directory. So you can see here, I gave you an example, CD folder and then CD dot dot. So let's go to the VM here. Let's log in as seed. These. All right, so we go to the terminal. Now I'm just going to navigate through here. So I'm going to do, I want to know where I am, ls-l, pwd. Now I'm going to go into desktop, clear, ls-l. I created a folder already for this course, I think. Did I do that? Yeah, no. 2023, 2024. I think I have actually. So I'm going to create a folder for this semester. I'm going to call it ITS 372 Spring 2025. This is where all my scripts are going to live, everything, files, etc. Okay, so now I'm going to CD into that. So I'm going to do CD ITS 372. I'm going to tap Spring 2025. All right, and I'm already there. You guys see that? I'm going to hit clear. All right, now what I want to do is, let's say I want to go back, right, to the parent folder of this folder. So that's what those 2 dots are for. So basically the dots mean current working directory or the parent of the current working directory. So for instance, CD dot means current working directory, right? This one. But if I want to go up one level, then I do an extra dot. And that's the meaning of it. So then now I should be right above in the desktop, and the contents of this is that folder. So now I'm going to go back in it. There. And now I'm inside. Okay, so that's basically the idea with those two commands. Now we can go back. So nano we've already addressed, and I'll create a script later. So we'll see how to use this. Now sudo, as I said, sudo is something that we're going to spend some time on actually because it has to do with access control, right? So it has to do with the security of the Linux operating system. It's central to it. So actually today is the introduction, but there's a lot of things, set UID and things like that that we still need to discuss in more detail. So it'll be a lecture just about that command. But for now, what you should know is you can, whenever let's say you're trying to install a program and only the system administrator, root, is allowed to install here, then if you try to do apt-get, it may not work. Like if you just tried this command, right? So if you just try that command, it may not work. So the solution to that is, because you need to scale up your privileges, you add the word sudo in front of it. And then if you've already been pre-approved, then it's going to let you do it and install. So we'll also talk about how that works internally in Linux later on. So you can apt-get is one way of installing programs in the Linux operating system and Ubuntu in particular. ls, cd we've covered, clear we've covered. Date, I'll leave this to you, but it's basically, you're setting the date and you just have to understand the particular format that you have to use to set the date correctly in case your operating system doesn't have the correct date. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions? All right. So yeah, so you can see that there. DF, so this is one of the things that you should explore, but DF is something that lets you know basically the size of the hard drive. It has to do with hard drive information. So you can see DF dash, I think H, right? And it gives you percentages. This should be your drive right there. Okay. All right, and we'll basically talk about these things later on, how we take a disk and we mount it into the file system. So we don't have this notion like in Windows of a C drive and a D drive and an F drive. Instead, we have the file system, and anywhere in that file system, we can mount a drive. You guys see that? So we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. All right, so those should be straightforward. Uname, see the version of the OS running. So this gets a little bit into querying the operating system, right? So this is, sysadmin here. So you're trying to automate things and you're trying to interact with the operating system. So it's almost like the first thing that you ask the operating system, right? Uname, what is your name? So uname-a. Right? And it tells you that my name is Linux VM, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So that's kind of information to it. So I call these information gathering as we start to monitor the operating system and we want to get information about it. Statistics, uptime, for instance, would be one of the metrics that we want to look at. Oops. Then we have wget. So this is one of the commands that starts to use the internet, right? So wget, so hopefully you guys ran it. PurdueCal.edu probably doesn't work anymore. Just change it with some other website, whatever you want, Wikipedia or something like that. And what should happen is it should download an HTML file. So you guys have taken 110 probably, and you know what an HTML file is. So it'll just download it as a text file on your folders. Cat, so you should research this tool. We'll be using it quite a bit, but essentially we'll use it to either copy things like concatenate two files into one file or to view the contents of a file. Okay, so that's something that I'll be using. And then we start to get into these commands like uptime, W, etc., which are commands related, again, to information gathering. So uptime, for instance, would tell me how long a computer has been running. Yeah, so uptime. You can see it says it's been up by one user, up by 8 minutes or so. And so this is important, of course, for servers, right? So whenever you're, let's say you're doing hosting of your company, you have an e-commerce site or something like that, and you're going to host it somewhere in the cloud. This is a statistic that your provider is going to quote. We have an uptime that is 99.99%, right? So that means they're barely ever down. And that's an important thing. So it gets, again, to this idea in sysadmin of monitoring things. And that's going to be a common theme throughout the semester, just looking at different tools via Linux or protocols such as SNMP, et cetera, that allow you to monitor the entire computer network. Okay. But basically, that's what the commands do. Then I'll leave these to you, but basically these commands, you can research them, last finger users, etc. They just provide information about the accounts, people that have been logged in, etc. Man is the manual. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Does it really? Did you try sudo apt install finger and that doesn't work? Okay, so let me see. Sudo apt install finger. This is a old tool, so let's see why it doesn't work. So mine seems to have worked, right? Okay, so, huh. Sudo update. Yeah, I was going to say that. So sometimes what happens is this with Linux, the way it works. Linux does, it's secure. It's meant to be very secure. So it doesn't just download anything off the internet, right? It has these like repos, these files in the Linux operating system that it uses for approved repos. And so what happens sometimes is that those things get out of date, especially with this VM, because it was made a few years ago and we're just now using it. So the repos have been updated probably. So what you have to do is you have to update those repos. And the way to do it is exactly as you said. So sudo apt update, for instance, apt-get. So it's starting to connect to the Ubuntu, the main website, and it's going to start updating those repos basically. So please run that and then try the command again, sudo apt install finger and see if that works for you. Does that work for you now? Great, thank you. Any questions about that, guys? So that's a common thing. If you're having issues with installation, just update the apt command. All right, and we're done. Any questions? All right, let's move on then. So that was those commands. So good. As I said, the man is the manual. You can look it up, or just nowadays. Remember, these systems were created, before the internet, pretty much. So they had a manual, but nowadays you can just Google things. It's probably a better solution. This one here, DHCP, this is one, and also the DNS, are two bullets that I just really wanted you to use the GUI for. So instead of using the terminal for these, you can just use the GUI of the Ubuntu machine. And the goal here is just to show you where you have your network settings and configuration, right? So you can go up here. This is so if you go to these two computers here, you're actually interacting with VirtualBox, right? The software that's running the VM. But if you go here to these little like three little computers and then go to wired and then wired settings, now you're interacting with the network settings of the Ubuntu Linux VM. Okay. And so here you can click on this one. And basically the whole point of that bullet is that you go here, right? And you see your IP address, IPv4 address, the route, your DNS servers. Notice it says 205, so that's the university's IP addresses. And then you can click on IPv4 here, and basically here DNS is set automatically, routes are set automatically, and your IPs and everything are set by DHCP automatically. So that's the whole point of that, just to show you where that is. If you want to play with it, do so, but you can turn off your internet, right? If you start making changes. But that's basically it. So just take a screenshot of this, and that would show you, that would show evidence that you did it, basically. Okay. Can go back to the Word document. This resolve conf, we will come back to this later on, but this is, you can also configure things in through the terminal, right? And one of the things that I'm showing you here is DNS. So we'll do some labs on DNS later in the semester. Configuration files are usually going to be located in the etc folder. So you need to go to etc, and here, if you go to that file, basically, you would see some entries. It's a text file. You would see some entries related to the DNS configuration, okay? Don't mess with it right now. Don't change it because it might affect things. Later on, we'll look at how to deal with DNS. All right. The dig command is something that we will use later on as well. Dig command also helps you with DNS resolution. You can give it a website, and it's going to give you the corresponding IP address. So it's basically a good, like ping is for network connectivity, DNS is for like DNS debugging, for instance. ifconfig, what is ifconfig? It allows you to look at your IP addresses on the computer. So terminal, ifconfig. Important things to note, this is your network interface right there. These computers come with Docker pre-installed, so later on we'll talk about Docker, but it's like a virtual machine that you can run within this virtual machine, right? So that's a different concept, but your actual network interface is this one. You can see you have the IP 10.024 with a network mask and everything, okay? Let's go back to the Word document. Making directories, I've shown you how to do that. All right, and the last part is basically the Python example. So I think some of you had questions on this. So I'll just demo this one. Basically, we're going to create a very simple hello world Python script, and then we're going to run it. Notice here, the chmod command is really important, but this is something that I'll elaborate a lot more later on in the semester when we look at access control, because it has to do with permissions again. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do this one, and that should complete the lab for today. So I'm in my folder already. So I'm going to use Nano, and I'm going to create a script first, or let's call it actually hello world. Hello world. .py. Just like that. And all I'm going to do is, this is a comment. I'm going to import OS, which is a very important library for lots of things, right? So this library allows you from Python to interact with the OS, the operating system. And then I'm going to do print hello world. Like that. So that's a Python script, basically. So I'm going to hit Control X, Y, Enter. So again, if you notice, this is Nano. I do Control X, and you can see that down here, Control X, right? Then you say yes, Y, and then Enter to save the name. Got it? Does that make sense? Perfect. All right. So, and now that I have that, you can take a look at it. Notice it's a hello world file. If you look at the permissions here, we'll learn about this later on, but for now, all you need to know is that these are the permissions for this file. R means that you can read the file. W means that you can write to the file, and currently there is nothing for this flag. but this flag relates to running, like an executable in Windows. Like when you go a file in Windows and it says .exe and you double click it and it runs, by default, that's not going to happen in Linux. So we have to tell it that we want to be able to run this script. All right, so the idea then is we need to change this permission to be X. However, something else needs to happen in the script. For this to work, the script needs to have a piece of information called a shebang, which basically tells it what interpreter to use. So I believe it is bin environment Python or a variation of that. So what this is saying is when you run this script, go to the bin folder, go to environment, and in there find a program called Python and run it. Could be Python 3 for you guys. Does this make sense, guys? Without this, it's not going to run. So Control X, Y. And again, it's for now, if I want to run it, I can simply use Python. Or because I have Anaconda, I may not need Python 3. You guys may need to add the number in there, Python 3. Okay? So Python hello world, I'm going to tab. If I run it, it runs fine. It prints the command. But if I want to run it as an executable from the terminal, I would have to do // hello world. Permission denied. Oh, yeah, go ahead. You would install Anaconda, or you can create like a redirection thing, but it's fine. I mean, it's the same thing. All right. So you can see it says permission denied, right? So it's a permissions issue. So, but the Word document already provides a hint of how to do this. So chmods, it means change the mode of operation for the file. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. Simple one right now is just to make everything executable, the X plus X. So I'm going to do that. chmod plus X, hello world. So notice now ls-l. So notice the difference, right? So up here, these were all like dashes, and now these have changed to X's. So what that means is that these files are now executable. You can run them, and this is a way to add permissions. So, and you can see now it runs. Does that make sense, guys? All right, so that's basically it for today. Did you guys have additional questions about the lab? You're all good, so you all understand what you need to do. So just run through these, answer the questions, provide screenshots that you did it. And as I said, the goal today was just to get the VM working. All right, so make sure you have that and then get a feel for Linux a little bit and complete these commands. Yes. Oh, yeah, thank you for reminding me. I have to create the link. So I'm going to end the session here.